Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay on this thing? You'll probably hear me even if I didn't have this thing, but welcome to the Virginia Cannabis Conference 2017. Give yourselves a hand for being awake in the morning. My name is Russ Belville. I am a writer with High Times and weednews.co. Encourage you to check out weednews.co for all your latest marijuana information. My High Times column, The Radical Rant, appears on Tuesdays and Fridays on hightimes.com. And I am the host of the Russ Belville Show, which is a live daily talk radio program. You can pick it up at cannabisradio.com or at radicalruss.com. So my talk today is on framing marijuana for 2017, continuing the battle to end adult marijuana prohibition in the era of Donald Trump. And my background, I'm from Portland, Oregon. And so where I'm at, it's legal. Like, I can walk down the street with an ounce in my pocket and nobody's gonna give me any problems with it. I can have 8 ounces in my house. Nobody's gonna give me any problems with that. I can grow 4 plants in my backyard. Nobody's gonna get any problems with that. But Oregon's a different place than Virginia. It's a whole lot different than Virginia. So what we're gonna cover today is some ideas on framing. And the idea of framing is how you deliver your message so that people can hear it. Right? I can tell you all the great facts and figures about marijuana, but if you're not ready to hear that information, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anybody any good. Now, I find that this is a very troubling time in marijuana reform, particularly because of this guy, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, the second most redneck name I could possibly imagine. The first being the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. His name is Jim Bob Cooter. That's the only name I can think of that's any more redneck than that. But Jefferson Beauregard Sessions has been nominated for the Attorney General position. He'd be in charge of the Department of Justice, which is in charge of the Drug Enforcement Administration, which would be in charge of going after marijuana. And he has said lots of things like, we're going to see more marijuana use and it's not going to be good. We need grown-ups in Washington to say marijuana is the kind of thing that ought not to be legalized. I see the danger and the president needs to speak out. This drug is dangerous. Good people don't smoke marijuana. I believe the Department of Justice needs to be clear. I think it's really serious.
Wait a minute, you don't have the Ku Klux Klan. I thought they were okay until I heard they were smoking pot.
That's right. That wasn't at this particular event, though. But back in the 80s, yes, he had said that he thought the Ku Klux Klan was okay.
How long ago was this comment?
This was in April. This was last April. There was a hearing at the Senate and the International Narcotics Control. And it was all about reacting to what was going on in Colorado and Washington State and Oregon and Alaska. And this was him grilling one of the guys from Colorado, one of the spokespeople from Colorado that had come up. And in his confirmation hearings lately, he's kind of softened his tone, like most people do when they're trying to get a job, right? I believe this guy. I don't believe the guy that's been sitting in front of the Senate these last couple of days that's saying, oh, well, you took me out of context. No, we know the context. This guy is a canna bigot on top of being a regular bigot. So that's why I'm a little worried. So I want to start off by giving you a little look at what we've accomplished so far, and then we'll talk about how we can accomplish more. I feel that nowadays, it's not a question of whether we're going to legalize marijuana, it's how and how soon. How much and how soon. And our election night was on November 8th of 2016, and I like to call it Marijuana Election Night. And it was quite a deal because it was one day before the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I kind of called our last election, this 2016 election, was the fall of the Berlin Wall of Prohibition. It's now just a matter of time before we get this rolled out to all the other states. Of course, we had some great results. We had marijuana go 8 for 9 in the election. The green ones being medical, the blue ones being adult use. The only one that lost was Arizona, but even Arizona beat Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Weed is more popular than the presidential candidates. And then California passing legalization is the biggest deal of all. California passing it is the 6th largest economy in the world, passing legalization, having legal cannabis commerce. Everything you see here in this column is a crime that was changed. The yellows are tickets, the reds are misdemeanors, the blues are felonies. Green is legal. So everything here that was a misdemeanor became legal. Felonies became legal. Tickets, still same tickets, some more felonies and misdemeanors changed to just misdemeanors. Just about every marijuana law in California has either been reduced or eliminated as far as criminal penalties go. With California adding, that's another $6 billion that we're going to be adding to the economy in the marijuana industry. And with California's Emerald Triangle being the world's biggest cannabis producer, it's going to cause a ripple effect throughout the rest of the cannabis industry. We're already seeing the end of the $1,000 pound on the West Coast. Wholesale growers can't get $1,000 for a pound anymore. They can out here. They can get a whole lot for a pound out here, and that's why we still have issues to deal with because of the differing state laws. But my favorite part about this, of course, is that retroactive resentencing. California is the first state to have done that. Every other state that passed legalization said, okay, from now on it's legal, but the people who are already in jail for it, tough luck, you're still in jail for it. In Oregon, we've done some expungement. We have some procedures to help people get their records expunged. But California is the first one that said, as of this day, not only is everybody legal now, but all the people who are in jail for that are free, or their sentences are reduced, or expunged, exactly. And President Obama, before he left office, said that what we've got now is an untenable situation in marijuana, in that we have differing laws, a patchwork of laws throughout the entire country. Right now, in America, 2 of our 6 time zones are legal. The entire Pacific time zone, with the exception of the Idaho Panhandle, and the entire Alaska time zone. So you can't have a country with 4 time zones where it's illegal and 2 time zones where it's legal, and that can't last for very long. And I'm very hopeful for our possibilities as we move forward, because now we are 20 years in to the medical marijuana era. If you are a college freshman, you've never not known medical marijuana. It's always existed, as far as you're concerned. If you are a college freshman these days, you've always known that marijuana wasn't the deadly, dangerous gateway drug that was going to lead straight to heroin, cause man boobs, and wreck your life, right? So we've got a lot we can do now. And this is the patchwork I'm talking about. And sometimes you'll see this map of the medical marijuana states, and I don't really like the typical map because they tend to do, here's some green states and here's some not green states, as if California's medical marijuana is the same as New York's. And they're not. They're quite different. And the way I break it down is that there's some states where you can buy and grow as a patient, but there's some where you can't buy, but you can grow. There's some places where you can buy, but some people can't grow. You can buy, but nobody can grow. And then you got all these CBD states down here. So I have a little patchwork that I like to put together. I think it gives us a better idea of the variety of laws that we've got. Oh, and by the way, anything you see on these slides or graphs or anything, my email address is radicalruss@gmail.com. I'll be glad to send you anything I got. So with the passage of our most recent legalization laws and medical laws in the 2016 election, we currently live in a country where 20% of our population lives in a legal state, and another 40% of our population lives in a medical state. In fact, if the United States were 20 people, we would have 4 of them living in legal states, 8 in medical states, 7 in CBD states, and only 1 out of 20 people in the United States lives in a place where it's completely prohibited, like absolutely going to jail no matter what. The other thing that gives me a lot of that makes me feel really good about our future is the rest of America agrees with us. This is a graph of every opinion poll that's ever been taken nationwide on legalizing marijuana from 1969 to last December. And the last 6 polls that are all there kind of highlighted, there's those last 6 polls, all above 50%, way above 50%. In fact, if you look at every poll that's been taken since legalization in Colorado, there's only been 7 times where there was more opposition than support. 31 times where there's more support than opposition. So I like to tease Kevin Sabet. I don't know if you know this guy. You know Kevin Sabet, Project Sam?
We know him.
Yeah, leading anti-prohibition or leading anti-marijuana activist in the country. And he formed this Project Sam to fight legalization after Colorado passed legalization. And since he's formed Project Sam, we've legalized 6 more states. And he's gone 7 and 31 in the past 4 seasons, and no wins in the past 2. If your quarterback was winless over the last 2 seasons, you'd probably bench the guy. Other things that we can point out is that legalization hasn't increased the use of marijuana by young people. This is one of the big scares. Oh my God, you legalize weed, kids are gonna start smoking weed. And my point to that was, legalizing weed's not gonna change a thing for young people. They've gotta hook up. They know where to get weed. They've already got a network of people to buy weed from, usually other kids, usually other teenagers. It's guys my age that benefit from legalization. I'm not gonna sit in the Walgreens parking lot for 30 minutes waiting for the guy that brings me a bag that's a ½ gram short full of sticks and stems. I'm the guy that benefits from legalization. But this is a kind of a look. This is relative to 1991, how have these statistics changed? The green lines represent 8th, 10th, and 12th graders' use of marijuana. The blue lines represent their disapproval of marijuana, and the red lines represent how risky they think marijuana is. So even though kids these days disapprove of marijuana use less, and even though kids these days think marijuana use isn't as harmful as it once was thought, they still aren't using it any much more than they used to. There was a slight spike there in the early 90s, but since about 97, since medical marijuana, those lines have stayed pretty steady or even gone down somewhat. So these prohibitionist fears that if we legalize marijuana, it's going to cause the kids to use more marijuana aren't coming true. They're just not happening. The other thing that's happened is that marijuana has increased or has shifted the bell curve of who uses marijuana. If you usually look at who uses the most marijuana most often, it's a bell curve that peaks around age 25. And then after 25, it starts to slope back down. Now that we've legalized, we've found that bell curve moving to a later and later age. Here's how we can demonstrate this. These blue bars represent the percentage, and the green represents the absolute numbers of people that use marijuana. In 2002, we had 3.4 million teenagers, 12 to 17, 3.4 million. Now, 2014, most recent, we still have 3.4 million or 3.3 million, even went down a little bit among teenagers. But for the seniors, 50 and older, we went from 2 million to 6 million. We've tripled the number of people over the age of 50 using marijuana. And I've always believed that if you get your AARP card at age 50, that ought to be your medical marijuana card. And you hit 50 and you've got something that's gonna be helped. And the other thing that's beneficial to us is that legalization hasn't increased drug dependence, or specifically has not increased marijuana dependence. These lines represent the marijuana use by adults is the green one, the blue one is how many days they're using, how harmful they think it is, daily use, and then that red line that doesn't move, that's marijuana use disorders. So even as more people have used marijuana, the marijuana use disorders have stayed flat. All right, so let's start thinking about framing a little bit. And this is me, by the way, at the Space Needle at midnight on December 6, 2012, when it became legal. I counted down on a bullhorn, had AP photographers in front of me. It was a lot of fun. But when it comes to doing this lobbying that we're going to be doing, and the point of trying to get your message across is to understand who you're talking to and what makes the issue interesting or important to them, not what makes it interesting or important to you. Now, there might be a lot of great reasons why you're in reform. I've tended in my time to identify 4 major reasons people get involved. 1, medical. I'm sick, I've got an illness, I got an injury, I need medical marijuana. That's gonna motivate you. You've been busted. You got busted and it made you mad. You're never gonna get busted again, you hated that. So that might put you there. You've lost something, you lost a job, a scholarship, an opportunity, custody of your kids over marijuana. That could motivate you. Or maybe you're just ideologically opposed. You're a strong conservative or you're a strong liberal or whatever you are, and it just doesn't fit your political worldview. So those reasons are intensely personal to you, and that's why you support ending prohibition. If I wanted you to not support ending prohibition, if I wanted you to support keeping marijuana illegal, what could I say to change your mind? It'd be pretty hard. But if I knew why you were doing this, I might be able to start finding a way. So this is the idea, is if you can identify why this is important to you, start identifying why it's important to the person you're talking to. And it may not be the same. Their reasons may be different than yours. So let's start with framing marijuana for red states. The first states that have passed major reforms, either medical or recreational, have largely been Western states with the initiative power. You guys don't get the initiative power. Most of the Eastern and Southern states don't. So we have to start rethinking how we're going to take on these other states. The states that we've passed so far are kind of low-hanging fruit, right? Really easy pickings. These other states, like the message I use in California or Oregon is not a message that's going to work in Virginia or Georgia. We have to come up with different messaging. So, the basics of framing. Framing is the concepts and contexts that we use to shape our viewpoints. Now, a typical example of this, and one of the leading thinkers on this subject is a guy named George Lakoff. And he wrote a book called Don't Think of an Elephant. And the idea of it is that framing represents not just the thing you're talking about, but everything that surrounds that thing. When I say elephant, you don't just think pachyderm, big, gray African animal with a long nose. You also think circus, GOP, Republicans, memory, mouse that scares the elephant. I mean, there's all sorts of other, Africa might pop into your mind. There's all sorts of things that are pop into your mind that are associated with elephant that really aren't actually elephant. They're just other contexts and concepts that go with it. And the idea of don't think of an elephant is that you cannot evoke a frame, you cannot negate a frame without evoking it. Like if I say don't think of an elephant, you just thought of an elephant, right? You can't not to, in order to not think of one, you have to think of what it is to not think of it. So when you're going there and trying to talk to your legislators, you can't say something like, marijuana is not a gateway drug. Well, you just evoked gateway drug. You just popped that in that guy's head. Don't give him the chance to think of that. Don't give them their talking points. So, one of the things that comes along when I do this framing talk is I get some people that are very diehard and dedicated to the idea we should never say marijuana. Oh, marijuana's awful, you should call it cannabis. Never say marijuana. I'm not one of those people. And the reason why is I think the cannabis versus marijuana issue is something that's interesting to us, but to the general public, they don't care. And part of the problem with trying to talk your way around marijuana, cannabis, that kind of thing, is there's another concept in framing called fig leafing. And fig leafing is when you're trying to use a euphemism to conceal something you think's embarrassing, like when you call yourself a custodial engineer rather than a janitor, right? You're a janitor. There's nothing wrong with being a janitor, but custodial engineer, ooh, sounds fancy. Well, that is what some people pick up when you try to push cannabis on them. We don't call it marijuana. We call it cannabis. That's its scientific name. Oh, well, hoity-toity you, right? Like, nobody likes to be told they're stupid, right? Nobody wants to be told that they're saying something wrong. Sometimes I'll get people that say, we can't say marijuana because it's racist. Harry J. Anslinger used marijuana, a Mexican name, to frighten people about the Mexican, and it's a racist word. Well, that may be or may not be. But if I come up to you and say, hey, you're saying racist things, you don't hear that. You hear, why is this guy calling me a racist? I'm not a racist. I just said marijuana. I'm not a racist. But if you say, oh, that's a racist word, people are going to take offense. They're going to think you're talking about them rather than the word. So that's why I don't get too much into this debate. I do like to say, though, that there is the problem of marijuana being a loaded frame. It does evoke Vietnam and hippies and liberalism and that kind of stuff to an older generation. They got that racist word problem. The problem, though, is that marijuana in the United States gets 10 times the recognition cannabis does. If you do a Google search on cannabis or a Google search on marijuana, the marijuana is going to get 10 times more hits. The cannabis search is going to bring up stuff from Australia, from the UK, from Europe, right? And that's fine that they like to say that in Europe, but they also like to say aluminium, degrees Celsius, and they call soccer football. So just because they say it somewhere different somewhere else doesn't mean we got to change our words here. And for the people that say, well, cannabis is the scientific name of the plant. Well, sure it is. But I could also say that I'm feeding bovine muscle to my Canis lupus familiaris. No, I gave my dog a steak, right? Talk with plain language and people are more likely to connect with you. If I start going into something, well, I feel that the bovine, blah, 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 you start using fancy words, you're going to possibly lose your audience. My simple rule of thumb is that marijuana is the thing I smoke, cannabis is the plant that makes it. I like to say marijuana and is what I smoke and the laws that ban it, cannabis is the plant that produces that. Another framing thing that's quite interesting is the fact that when it comes to marijuana and drugs generally, we live in a different frame than alcohol. It's so hard sometimes getting this point across to some people that alcohol is a drug. And part of the reason why is because alcohol has a whole different vocabulary around it. It has a whole different framing. When you're taking alcohol, you don't say you're taking alcohol or that you're doing alcohol. You're drinking. You're not even drinking alcohol, you're just drinking. Alcohol's assumed, right? That's how ingrained it is in our culture. We take doses or hits, they take drinks or shots. You're a drug user or abuser, they are just drinkers. They get tipsy or buzzed, we get high or fried. They get drunk, we get stoned, they get hungover, we have overdoses. They are alcoholics, we are addicts. But really, those terms are all equal. We just have a whole different language for alcohol compared to marijuana. That gives you an idea how powerful framing is. That's why so many people can accept alcohol being a legal drug, despite the fact it kills and maims and hurts so much in our society, because this entirely different frame is around it that leads people to not even think of it as a drug. It's something different.
Alternative facts.
Yeah, alternative facts, there we go. Alt facts. This is a picture from 2010. This was out front of Oaksterdam University when California was voting on Prop 19 to try to legalize marijuana. And these were marijuana smokers who formed a group called No on Prop 19. We dubbed them the Stoners Against Legalization. But some of our typical messaging over the years has been among these 8. If we legalize marijuana, it's going to generate a lot of tax revenue. It'll allow police to go after real crime. Drug dealers don't check kids' IDs. Marijuana being illegal benefits gangs and crime. It's a safer substance than alcohol. It'll help end the black market if we legalize it. It'll stop the racist harassment of minorities that we get over marijuana. And it'll increase medical access for sick people. These are the messages that have won in the low-hanging fruit states. Some of these may work here in Virginia. You are going to know your legislators better than I do. But I'll give you all the possible, I'll give you a few just examples how we might deal with some of these. So to reframe this debate for a conservative audience, we want to make sure we hit on a few points. Prohibition is the problem. If you go forth to someone trying to describe what will be, we ought to legalize because it'll be beautiful and we'll make money and the sun will shine and, right? You're asking them to imagine an abstract. Get them to hate what exists now, right? Hate the reality of prohibition. You don't have to convince them to like marijuana. You don't have to convince them that's going to be any good or any. Convince them that what we're doing now is not working. We have a problem we must solve now. Prohibition is the problem. We need to show that it's personal. I could go to a legislator and say, well, 650,000 people a year are arrested on marijuana charges. Boring, he didn't care. If your daughter went to Virginia Commonwealth University and was in a dorm room and her friend pulled out a bong and they were caught by the RA, you'd be bailing your daughter out of jail and paying her fine. That's personal. One arrest that's somebody's daughter is going to affect them more than 650,000 nameless people across the country. Find a way to make prohibition personal to that legislator. Either, if you know the legislator has done some work on, say, cancer issues, well, there's your in, right? Marijuana and cancer. If you know that the legislator had a family member who got busted, well, there's your in. You've got something to talk about. And then we also have to show that marijuana prohibition's ineffective. They think marijuana is bad. They think it's a terrible thing that's going to be cause terrible problems in society. We need to show them that no matter how bad you think marijuana is, making it illegal makes it worse. Again, we don't need to convince them marijuana is good or it's going to be great that we legalize. We need to convince them it's a danger if we don't. If we identify the solution, that invites critique. If we say the solution is, they say, oh, well, this won't work because of that, and that, and that, and that. But instead we say we've got a problem, we must change, that's going to invite cooperation. That's going to make people want to help solve the problem and have some buy-in on the solution itself, rather than you telling them what the solution is going to be. All right, so let's do some concrete examples of some typical framing types of arguments, archetypes, if you will. I started this idea with my redneck uncle. I'm originally from Idaho, right? I left Idaho in 2003 because I discovered you could. Like, there's no gates, there's no walls, no guards. You can leave.
They should build a wall.
Build that wall. So I got a redneck uncle, and once I started working for High Times and doing the marijuana thing, every time I'd go back for a family thing, they'd needle me about it. Here's old pothead Russ, right? Joke, right? So he's one of those God-fearing, NASCAR-watching, hunting-fishing Republican who hates hippies, welfare queens, and the government. So if I go to redneck uncle and say, well, but redneck uncle, cannabis cures cancer. He don't care. Hemp can save the planet. He don't care. Prohibition's racist, it costs too much money. He don't care. In fact, some of those things might be a good thing in his mind. So in his world, you can't spend too much money trying to eradicate the pot and the hippies and thugs that smoke it. He sees prohibition as a good. It's actually doing something good for him. So what we need to do is leverage his hatred to get some cognitive dissonance going on. Cognitive dissonance is when your brain's got two conflicting things going on and it makes you uncomfortable. So here's how I did it. Gee, uncle, you hate hippies so much. Why do you help them by keeping pot illegal? I mean, you have to get up every morning at 6 in the morning, put on your work clothes, go to a job you hate, get done at 5. Maybe at the end of the night you can relax with a 6-pack. They're going to take taxes out of your paycheck. They're going to sales tax you on the beer. Meanwhile, hippie wakes up at noon, throws on a tie-dye t-shirt, walks down to the park, pays no taxes, slings a few bags. He's done by 4:20, sitting on his couch and getting high. So by prohibiting marijuana, you're actually helping the hippie. You know what the hippie would hate? Is if you legalized that and made it a job. And trust me, I know some of these folks in Oregon who hate legalization for that very reason. Too many regulations, too much taxes. So I got my redneck uncle to actually kind of flip a little bit because he started to realize, wait a minute, why am I letting those guys get away with a tax-free lifestyle? People are either heroically motivated to solve a problem or to prevent an evil. And so I gave him an evil to prevent, the evil of subsidizing hippies in his world. Prohibition wasn't an evil to him. It was good to him. It oppressed hippies. But my frame gave him something to hate worse, the idea that he was helping them. If we shift that focus to the prohibition, that helps to cause cognitive dissonance. Another type is the true believer. Now, you might not have as many of these out here in Virginia, but maybe a few. You know the kind, well, that's not true legalization. What, only an ounce? Why, nobody tells me how much beer I can buy. You've heard these guys, right? Well, to them, they don't support legalization because they think legalization's an evil. It's gonna bring in taxes and regulation and the man, and it's gonna be awful. And sometimes some of these people are underground growers and dealers, and so they got a financial motivation to not legalize. So what I do there is, again, find what he hates. Well, he hates the man. He doesn't like the idea of the man, all right? So I'll leverage that by saying, if you are voting against legalization, you're voting with the cops. Why do you like cops so much? Why are you supporting the cops? You must want cops to bust people, huh? You're a cop lover, aren't you? Boy, a true believer do not like that. They get real mad when you start calling them cop lover. And so you kind of get on their side too. Look, I want legalization to be better too, but some legalization is better than none. And you can point out that, look, dude, if you're growing illegally, it's still going to be illegal in other places. You're still going to make money. And if you're growing illegally, legalization kills probable cause. Drug dogs can't sniff for weed anymore. Cops can't use seeds and stems in your garbage to justify a search warrant. The anonymous tip from the neighbor doesn't mean anything anymore. So that's some of the ways you can get around that. He sees himself as the hero fighting for the good of true legalization, and that legalization itself is a wolf in sheep's clothing. We get around that by redirecting this into how their legalization doesn't change the operation, it just improves it. Another person we have to deal with, the recovering addict. The recovering addict has a personal issue with drugs, and they feel they're just evil per se, right? They're just bad, bad, bad. We must keep them illegal. So if we start talking about tax revenue, to them that sounds like blood money. To them that just sounds like, yeah, sure, we could legalize, we could tax rape too. How would that work? Well, No, it's not a comparison. What we need to show them is that, again, no matter how bad they think the drug is, it's worse when it's illegal. Prohibition didn't stop your problem, did it? Prohibition existed and you got addicted. How is prohibition going to stop someone else from getting addicted? How many addicts can't get a treatment bed because some drug court put a pothead there? How much tax money could we get from pot to fund drug treatment? These are some of the arguments that you can use to start swaying that type of person. And legalizing marijuana reduces drug addiction. We have numerous studies now showing that states that have access to medical marijuana have fewer opiate overdoses, fewer opiate deaths, fewer opiates prescribed by about 1,500 pills less a year when there's access to medical marijuana. So we're going to give them a crusade. We're going to give them something good to solve. Leverage their compassion. They've got that compassion for the drug addicts. Leverage that compassion to showing if you want to help drug addicts, you legalize. And try to separate smoking pot from doing drugs. That's one of my favorite things of legalization, is getting marijuana out of the hard drug market. And our final person to deal with is the concerned parent. They want their kid to be drug-free. They may or may not have smoked pot in their life, but they don't want their kid to do it. And one of the things they like about prohibition is it gives them an easy out. They can say, don't do it because you'll go to jail. Now the drug conversation's over. I don't have to have that unpleasant conversation with my kid because I can just say it's illegal, don't do it. Well, if we take that away from the parent, they're a little scared. Like, now how am I going to tell them kids not to do drugs? And we might say, look, drug dealers don't check ID. We're going to put it in adults-only stores. But everybody here snuck a beer when they were under 21, didn't you? You found someone to buy you a beer. The way we get around that is we say, yeah, but you weren't buying that beer from another teenager, were you? Somewhere along the line, you had to corrupt an adult. That's what legalization does, is it makes it so somewhere along the line, an adult's involved. So at least we have some level of protection for the kids. Prohibition, and here's how we leverage their fear. Their fear is their kid's going to do drugs. We say, well, prohibition enables teen drug use. Since 1975, the Monitoring the Future study has asked American 12th graders, if you wanted to get a bag, would it be easy to do so? But from 75 to today, that number has never been below 80% of kids that say it would be easy or fairly easy to score weed. So that's how we show them, look, your prohibition's not working. Any kid that wants weed can get it. He knows someone in his school that will sell it to him. But family matters are not crimes. If your kid got caught with weed, would you rather ground him, take the weed, and drop his allowance, or would you rather visit him in a cell, hire a lawyer, and pay bail? Make prohibition the parent's problem, that if your kid gets into it, whether they take drugs or not, I mean, the kid could get busted with a friend who's got drugs, right? So you make that argument. And again, there's also that forbidden fruit thing about drugs being illegal. Try to convince the parent that legalizing marijuana makes it boring. There was a great cartoon that came out in the Oregonian after we passed marijuana legalization, and it was these two kids playing their video games, and there was a dad with a big pot leaf t-shirt on and a mom with a tie-dye on, and the dad is saying to the kids, well, kids, since they legalized pot, your mom and I are going to go get us a bag of Maui Wowie. And the kid's little thought balloon goes, oh, geez, pot is so lame. We turn pot into mom and dad's Chardonnay, it becomes lame for the kids. So, the final thought, don't oversell legalization. Instead, fight prohibition. Because we could run into some problems. Taxing marijuana will generate revenue to fix our schools. Yeah, when you're taxing weed that costs $300 an ounce, that price of weed drops to $20 an ounce, you're not going to get a whole lot of tax revenue off it. So that's a dangerous possibility. Legalization will end the black market and cripple the cartels. No, it won't. There will always be a black market in weed. There's black markets in DVDs and purses and shoes. There's black markets in everything. So don't ever try to oversell it by saying, we're going to end the black market. No, you're just going to make the black market a little less profitable, is what you're going to do. Medical marijuana laws will be unaffected by our legalization. This doesn't really affect you guys much, but in the western states, we had states that had medical already, and then we're adding legalization, and that frightened people into thinking it was going to affect the medical marijuana law, and then our side would say, oh, no, it won't, it won't, it won't. It will. There's nothing you can do in passing legalization that won't affect medical marijuana. The reason why? Medical marijuana is an exception to criminal prosecution. If the criminal prosecution doesn't exist anymore, what are you giving them an exception to? So there's going to naturally be some sort of effect. Police will have more time and resources for real crime. Not really. It's not like cops are saying, all right, this half hour, I'm going to go bust marijuana smokers. Right? No, they're just doing their day-to-day 8-hour job, and along the line, they find some marijuana smokers. So it's not going to help increase their time in any meaningful way. Marijuana enforcement's disproportionately racist. This is true. Black and Latino people are 3 to 7 times more likely to get busted for the same exact crime. More likely to get a longer sentence. But in Oregon and Colorado and all these places we've legalized like an ounce, guess who still gets disproportionately busted for more than an ounce? So we still have, it's like, ending the war on drugs isn't going to solve racism in policing, but you can't solve racism in policing without ending the war on drugs. But by itself, that's not going to fix the whole problem. The one point we've got that can never be rebutted is that the war on drugs has failed by its own standards by every measure. $1 trillion in costs, over 25 million arrests, and no end in sight. There you go. That's my look at Framing 101. Again, my name is Russ Belville. You can find me at Radical Russ on everything. Like literally, if it has a username, I'm Radical Russ on it. And if you'd like any of these slides, charts, data, or anything else, feel free to send it my way. We've got some other great speakers for you, and I'll be around during break times if you'd like to talk, do some question and answer. Thanks so much. So now we have the benefit of getting to hear from one of my favorite presenters and thinkers on the issue of drugs, drug policy, and particularly marijuana. He's with the Brookings Institute, one of the leading think tanks in the nation when it comes to government and policy. He is author of Marijuana, A Short History. Please welcome John Hudak.
Thanks to Jen and Cindy for the invitation, and thanks all of you for coming out today. I would thank Russ, but that was a hell of an act to follow. I can certainly not have that level of energy, and it's not because I'm not excited to speak with you. I'm just not that much of a morning person. And I've flown back and forth across the country so many times in the last 2 weeks. I also don't know what time zone I'm in most days, and so bear with me if I'm a little lower energy than Russ. Though to be fair, on my best day, I still have less energy than Russ. I'm going to talk a little bit about where marijuana policy is right now. As Russ said in my introduction, I'm a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. I am not a drug policy activist. I am a policy researcher. I don't have a horse in this race. I have my own personal politics on this issue, but my work looks at the types of issues that I study on a regular basis on a variety of issues, including regulation, bureaucratic organization, executive power, legislative relations, all the sexy stuff of government. And my training is actually in studying the American presidency. And as part of the extension of that work, I've been looking at, as I said, the types of questions that every government has to face on every area of public policy, and now state governments are having to face these issues around marijuana policy. And so I'm going to talk a little bit today, as I said, about where we are in terms of state policy, where we are federally, what to expect in the next 4 years under the new administration, and talk a little bit about what the advocacy community can think about moving forward, whether it's here in Virginia, whether it's in DC, or whether it's in state capitals across the country. In a lot of ways, marijuana policy is at a turning point. We are coming off of an election day in 2016 that on some fronts shocked a lot of Americans, at least in terms of presidential politics, in terms of Senate politics. But in many ways, it wasn't that surprising what happened at the ballot box on referenda involving marijuana. Almost every referendum that was on the ballot in terms of pro-reform, pro-marijuana reform, passed. Russ mentioned them. 4 states for recreational, 4 states for medical, with the exception of Arizona, but also down ballot at the municipal level. There were opt-out provisions in counties and municipalities in Colorado that were defeated. There were a lot of ballot initiatives below that top line, below that state level, that motivated pro-marijuana groups to pat themselves on the back. You guys worked hard. You got a lot accomplished. It was by far and away the most successful year in the history of the movement. And so where do you go from there? What types of things do you need to think about? One item that you have, one bit of wind at your back, is public opinion. Russ talked a lot about the polls that have come out over the last several years. In terms of recreational legalization, marijuana is now polling at its highest rate ever, over 60%. Medical marijuana policy is supported by over 80% of Americans. There hasn't been a poll done at the state level on medical marijuana in terms of just diffuse on the issue, not necessarily on a ballot measure, that has had sub 50% since California legalized in 1996. That's great. There are a lot of fights out there. There are a lot of advocacy organizations on other issues that are fighting an uphill battle against public opinion. You're not. And that is a tremendous benefit. But it's more than that. You're seeing minds change in the oddest of places, in places that you never expected. So we came off this successful year in 2016, and there can be reactions to successful ballot initiative drives. People can react against. So you can imagine a scenario in which evangelical conservatives, for instance, see what's happening. You can't even say out west anymore, but in California, Nevada, Massachusetts, Maine, Florida, everywhere, and say we have to fight against that. We have to push back against what is this wave. We saw this on same-sex marriage. As states became more permissive on same-sex marriage laws, there were the opposite reactions in conservative states, passing constitutional amendments to ban gay marriage. We are not seeing that on marijuana. We're seeing the opposite. You see serious conversations here in Virginia on medical marijuana. You see serious conversations in Texas, in Georgia on medical marijuana. These are states that are considered the last ones to fall. I lived in Tennessee for 6 years. There are very serious organizations there working to push the legislature where there is bipartisan support for serious, full-fledged medical marijuana programs. If you told me when I moved from Tennessee 5 years ago that that was going to happen, I would have laughed in your face. It is a true conservative state that makes Virginia look like the Bay Area. And there are serious conversations happening there. Rhode Island, Connecticut, they both now have legislation for recreational marijuana legalization. Connecticut does not have a ballot initiative process either. If Connecticut is going to legalize, it's going to happen in Hartford through the House and Senate passing laws and the governor signing them. These are conversations that were unthinkable 5 years ago even, forget 10 years ago or 15 years ago. What's happening here in Virginia is meaningful. You have Democrats and Republicans in the legislature who are thinking about this in ways that I think many of you in this room would have never thought they would be thinking. And they themselves are probably surprised at where they have moved on this issue and how they've moved on this issue. But it's an uphill battle. It's a very difficult fight. You see successes and you see failures at the state level. We saw a ballot initiative in Ohio fail in 2015 to legalize recreational marijuana. Now granted, it was a disastrous ballot initiative put in the exact wrong time. But you saw in 2014, the medical initiative in Florida fail by just a little bit. It was a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy and effort and love and sweat and tears poured into that initiative in Florida. It ended up getting passed 2 years later, but for the people working on that initiative in 2014, that was devastating. And so what you need to think about too is not just what you want, as Russ said, but how to frame that, and to think about the context in which you're working in. We're going to elect, I'm a Virginian now, we're going to elect a governor, a lieutenant governor, an attorney general this year. The governor and the attorney general are going to have a very meaningful role in deciding whether what you want is achievable. The governor is going to have to sign legislation if you want medical marijuana reform. You can have an attorney general who can make things very smooth or very sloppy for you if and when medical marijuana reform passes. You saw the attorney general at Dulles Airport yesterday with the governor, fighting against the president's new ban on individuals coming to this country from 7 Middle Eastern and North African nations. You may disagree with the president's policy, you may agree with the president's policy, but it puts into stark contrast just how important the governor of Virginia and the attorney general of Virginia can be in terms of pushing forward their own advocacy around a policy that they do or do not like. What you saw at Dulles yesterday should not inform you about immigration. It should inform you about the institutional power of statewide elected officials in the state. And then apply that lesson in thinking about what those people can do for medical marijuana reform, or the ways in which they can hinder medical marijuana reform. As we learned on November 8th, elections have consequences. It's true for the presidency, it's true for Senate races, and it's true for state legislative and statewide offices in Virginia. We need to think more, you need to think more about how you connect the energy that's in this room and the energy that's in your movement, not just to the marijuana issue, but to getting out there and supporting candidates who will also reflect your views. Again, as someone who studies the presidency and presidential elections, I get to talk to a lot of people about this issue. This year, that was an agonizing process, which I would have preferred waterboarding rather than talking to people about, I may get it yet, that's true. If the president reads my Twitter account, I'm absolutely getting waterboarded. On my drive back to Arlington later on, I'll just get turned off to Langley, and then you'll never hear from me again. But I heard a lot of people, a lot of progressives, a lot of liberals saying, there's no difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. They're going to be the same thing, just another corporatist, insider hack. If you think that Hillary Clinton would have banned people from 7 majority Muslim countries yesterday if she were president, you're insane. If you think that a lot of the executive actions that have been passed in the first 9 days of this administration would have looked exactly like the executive orders and presidential memoranda that would have been passed under Hillary Clinton, you're insane. These are two very different individuals with two very different ideologies. You can hate both of them, that's fine. You can think that they're not going to push forward with the type of progress that you necessarily want. But the idea that there was no consequence between Trump or Clinton is a total misreading of American politics, of political ideologies, and of the candidates themselves. And so when you look out now at the marijuana policy landscape, people are terrified. They might have been terrified if Hillary Clinton was president, but I know one thing for sure. It's hard to guess, it's hard to make predictions about presidential politics, but here's one I am certain of. Jeff Sessions would not be Hillary Clinton's attorney general. Russ put up a lot of quotes that Jeff Sessions said. It sounded like drug war rhetoric from the 1970s or 1980s and not from 2016. But those are legitimate and serious words from a United States senator. I think Russ and I disagree a little bit about what Sessions will be like as Attorney General, but there is a risk to the marijuana movement that Jeff Sessions presents. He will have the institutional power to make a mess of the marijuana industry, to make a mess of the reform movement. There is a serious need for advocacy organizations like yours, not only, again, to push forward with what you know and love and believe, and not only to help elect the officials who you think will represent your views best, but also to hold to account the individuals who the president selects to run this government. Those people need to hear your voices in the same way that they will hear other voices. There are a lot of myths out there about what marijuana policy is going to look like under Donald Trump. I've spoken at a couple of conferences in the past few weeks, and I've spoken on this issue, and I've heard people speak on this issue. There's this idea that Donald Trump isn't going to do anything negative to medical or recreational marijuana because public opinion is so high. Well, if public opinion was so high, if public opinion was the determinant of what our policy looked like, we would have comprehensive immigration reform, universal background checks for guns, and a heck of a lot of other policies that we don't have now, and we'd be scrapping a lot of policies that we do. That 62% or 63% of Americans support recreational legalization means nothing to the President of the United States. That 80 to 85% of Americans support medical marijuana legalization means nothing to the President of the United States. The other myth is that the industry is too big. You can't do anything about an industry that has grown that big. I spoke at a cannabis investors conference in LA a couple of weeks ago. This is the core of this idea that the industry has grown in such a robust way. And I was not the popular guy in the room when I told them, your industry is small by any metric of American capitalism. You are a speck of dust in a clutter of dirt of American capitalism. I said, the president, at that time the president-elect, is planning to repeal the Affordable Care Act. If you think that hospitals, doctors, and the pharmaceutical industry are small enough to be shaken down by the president, but the cannabis industry is too big to face the same challenge from the president, once again, you're insane. So these are myths that have to be taken seriously and walked away from. Because one thing I've learned in the cannabis policy space is there's nothing more robust than the telephone game. A whisper here, a whisper there, and suddenly something that someone invents based in no reality whatsoever becomes a tried and true fact that is irrefutable. The idea that the industry is too big, people will argue to their death, or they'll argue until the industry gets their boat rocked because they're not too big and not too powerful. And so, working within this system, you have to address your own passions, but you have to address the institutional challenges and realities that you face. So, some people argue that Trump is actually pro-marijuana, or he's pro-big business, and that is going to push him in a direction to have Jeff Sessions take a hands-off approach. That's obviously not true. Donald Trump is a teetotaler. He's a man who, by all accounts, has never had a drink, smoked a cigarette, or used an illicit substance in his life. He has not tasted alcohol, if you take him at his word, which, you know. But you know, for all of the tabloids that Donald Trump has been in, he's actually never been photographed holding a drink. And so you have to assume there's some legitimacy to that claim. The idea that Trump surrounds himself with people who are pro-marijuana or who have money in the industry like Peter Thiel, who would not let the president do this. Again, the president has a lot of money and a lot of businesses, even though he shouldn't. And some of those investments are going to be hurt by some of the policies that he enacts. If you don't think that Trump's hotels are going to be affected by banning an entire religion of individuals from this country, I don't know how to explain to you that there are certain business connections that he will care about, and there are other consequences that he will just let flesh out. But it's not to say it's all doom and gloom under President Trump. Sessions' confirmation hearing, I think, was one of the most informative moments about what the future might look like. Russ put up a lot of quotes that Senator Sessions said this year, but in his confirmation hearing, he responded to a question from Senator Leahy about CBD oil. And I found this to be the most revealing moment in the confirmation hearing. If you haven't seen it, I suggest it. It's about a 3-minute clip. If you Google Sessions marijuana policy in C-SPAN, they come up with the individual clip itself. And what he effectively said was, attorneys general have to prioritize resources. The Department of Justice only has $23 billion to run its budget, which seems like a lot of money, but that has to run DOJ, I'm sorry, it has to run FBI, DEA, the Bureau of Prisons. It has to fund every criminal prosecution in the United States, as all of the US attorneys work for the Department of Justice. That money goes fast. So Sessions said, an attorney general needs to prioritize. And he said, Attorneys General Lynch and Holder created a prioritization for marijuana cases, essentially the Cole and Ogden matters, to consider these things. He said, and I think that prioritization had some merit and some benefit. He said, my concern is that it actually wasn't followed. Reading between the lines, it means you laid out your 8 warning areas in the Cole memos, and the states who are violating those there's no intervention there. For instance, the Cole memos say that a state needs to create a robust regulatory system around medical and recreational marijuana in order to avoid federal intervention. If that was being supported, the California system would have been shut down because there was nothing robust about its regulatory system until the new legislation was passed this year. So you could see that line from Sessions and say, this guy's just lying in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee because he wants to get confirmed. Jeff Sessions hates Attorney General Holder and Lynch. There is no reason for him to say anything nice about them. He actually went out of his way to suggest that he thought their policies, their prioritization was a good thing. If he was just spinning his wheels trying to get confirmed, he'd say, there's a lot of ways in which Department of Justice prioritizes cases. I'm going to look at each of those and think about whether they are effective and should be continued. That's the sort of punting that you do as a cabinet nominee. You don't go out of your way to compliment 2 people you can't stand. And so I think that was a very revealing moment for Jeff Sessions. I wrote a piece a couple of days after his hearing concluded, and it was titled, Jeff Sessions needs to think more like an accountant and less like an attorney. It's easy for a senator, a United States senator, especially from a place like Alabama, to spew the rhetoric that Russ put up on the screen. But when you're actually Attorney General and you realize, I have to prosecute a lot of criminal cases around drugs, and I don't have the money to do it, you have to think strategically and politically. Strategically means you have to find the right cases that are going to be cheap wins for you and are going to address serious issues. Politically, again, you don't want to lose, but you also want to address the issues which the public cares most about. So the way to frame this is, ask any American, what is a bigger risk to you? A legal, regulated marijuana dispensary in Denver or the opioid crisis? It's an easy answer. I mean, maybe Kevin Sabet, not even Kevin Sabet would answer that a legal dispensary is worse. And so he is going to have to think about what his role will be as a law enforcement official and how he should use that in the most strategic way possible. And I think ultimately, if the president hates marijuana, if Jeff Sessions hates marijuana, we know one thing this president hates more, and that's losing. This is a losing proposition for him. He will not be able to shut down the 14,000 cannabis businesses in the United States, the legal regulated cannabis businesses in the United States. He can try, but he can't go into a state like Colorado and enlist the Denver PD and the Colorado State Police to help him, because they can say no, and there's nothing Trump can do about it. And so, looking out at who the cabinet nominees are, who the cabinet officials will be, and the president's assessment of risk, you start to see some bright spots. You have Steve Mnuchin, the president's nominee to be the Treasury Secretary, who has said that he will work to find ways to level the playing field for cannabis businesses. It's a pretty remarkable step. Steve Mnuchin doesn't strike me as a culturally conservative guy. He's a Wall Street banker. I'm sure he's seen way more product sniffed off the boardroom tables at Goldman than you could imagine. But these are people who are in positions to make life difficult for the marijuana industry, even if the reality of that may produce a situation in which they are not difficult for the marijuana industry. But you have to remain on guard. You have to remain motivated, and you have to hold them accountable. And so I'm going to wrap up shortly, but one of the ways in which you hold these officials accountable is not just building on the motivation and the organization and the excitement that exists within the marijuana community, but building on broader engagement that exists in our society. And if there's one thing that the Trump presidency has done in the first 9 days, it's brought Americans together to protest against him. My wife last weekend went with about 600,000 of her best friends to march on the mall for the Women's March. I'm sure some or many of you were there. At 1 o'clock today, as I was sitting in the back before, my wife sent me a poster that she designed for this weekend's protest, which will be at 1 p.m. in front of the White House, protesting the president's immigration order from Friday. There are a lot of people who are coming together to oppose the policies that they don't like. Mobilization is salient right now, more so than I've seen in my lifetime. What you're seeing now is end of Vietnam era protest and mobilization and angst and worry. That is something that will matter for immigration policy, will matter for women's rights. But if you tap into that and seize on that and frame your argument as part of a broader pushback against unfairness, inequity, or however you define, or as Russ said, however you frame your argument, you tap into that sentiment and you win. It doesn't have to just be the people in this room, but if people are pissed off enough, they're going to fight for whatever cause they feel they need to fight for. You need to show the 600,000 people who marched on the mall in Washington, or the millions of people who marched in the Women's March around the world, that there is a justice issue involved in your movement, and they should be involved in that as well. And so all that is to say that there is a history in this country of having mobilization movements timed perfectly. One of those mobilization movements, and Jen said she would let me plug my new book, Marijuana Short History, available in the lobby. Jen has some copies available, is the timing of the creation of medical marijuana in California. I learned about this while writing the book, that there was a moment in the Bay Area where hundreds of men were dying of AIDS. It was a very dark moment in our nation's history. It was a very difficult moment in terms of epidemiology as doctors were trying to figure out what to do. And medical marijuana happened in California because it was bringing relief to men dying of AIDS. It wasn't as much for cancer patients or people with gout or glaucoma or any of that. It was happening because these men were dying, more than the hospitals could handle in a day. And some of them, in their final days, with no appetite and AIDS medications that were, ravaging their system, and in excruciating pain, were getting some benefit from medical marijuana. Those are two movements that came together. Those are two movements that saw interest in activity and advocacy and momentum on both sides, and instead of having parallel movements, they joined forces and they passed a ballot initiative in the nation's largest state. There are moments in our history around marijuana policy where those windows open perfectly and the right forces come together. And I think if you look out at the discontent that is happening all across America right now, it is not difficult to shoehorn the marijuana issue into that movement. And so I say here again, not as an advocate, but as someone who really respects the advocacy views of organizations like this, who can applaud what has been real political savvy and political knowledge and political execution over the past several years that has moved this from a very taboo, giggly issue that was laden with puns to serious public policy where you're going to be up the street fighting this week on its behalf, where you have institutions that are gray and old and boring like Brookings actually doing work on this. And while I think the new administration scares a lot of people, I think you should rest assured that it's not all end of times. I guess unless he uses the nuclear codes, it's not all end of times. But the motivation that's growing, the momentum that's growing around the country is something that will absolutely benefit organizations like yours. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
All right, we're going to get our panel up to discuss, but real quick while they're getting up, if you want to grab some goodies, some drink, give yourself a quick moment while we get set up.
There's some chairs available on the table. You guys feel free to.
Hey, Don. Hey, Don. Don. Will you make me a sweet tea? Real life.
Hey, make me sweet tea, bro.
Just a little, all right, just keep it in perspective. I know these
Should have
people.
just thrown you under the bus on the interview.
Oh, God.
So what do you think about?
I should have just
what do
made
think
you
about
run up and
Virginia
do it.
NORML? Well, you
Is
know,
it break
Jim
time?
Michelle's fucked up. She's not doing a good job. I think like if we had a real group out here, we could probably make something.
Every mic is hot, every camera is on.
Yes, thank you.
I'm not how sure you want to sweet you want to be this morning. Does that make you sweet enough? You want more?
No, I just wanted you to do it.
You want me to make the damn thing?
Yeah, no, she actually does.
Gotta pee.
Stir it up and everything. It's so funny. I should have. Next time I will. You're going straight under the bus. Straight under.
Is there a mic on? Because Kevin would like to say something derogatory about
Yeah. I mean, besides paying for my hotel, I mean, it wasn't that much.
I'm trying to remember that
She's a questionable character.
I know and like these people.
Here's the poster for today's march. I'm gonna see her like once a month, I think now, because between my travel and her protesting is just, but hey, more power to her.
Yeah, right?
I gotta be careful. Last week for the Women's March, it was, one side said, history was hacked by hate. She had a double-sided sign. History was hacked by hate, and the other side just said, fuck that guy.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. That really
That's the best. That's awesome.
I saw a few in Denver. Sessions smokes meds. All over Denver.
Yeah, you know someone's gonna come out with a Jeff Sessions strain.
Oh, well, I think that's called Charlotte's Web. Hippie's Dilemma, whatever.
Mutated like run plant. That would be hilarious. Like the $99 ounce special should be like the Sessions.
That's great.
Yeah, it's frightening. I was talking to Jen Michelle about it. Normally I like to tune in and stay up to date with news, current events, all that stuff. But it's been rough this year. It's horrible. It's horrible. Like the only news that I'm getting at this point is when I log into my computer, my home screen, and it says like Trump screwed up again.
Yeah.
I'm like,
All right, how are we handling this? You guys just
Well, I hope
free for all.
Justin remembers to come up here and sit on this panel.
Turn it over to you and just let you fly.
Justin,
sure.
Okay.
I know you're on this panel. Oh, over to us? Well,
Do you want to have Russ identify
don't you
us
have
as
some? Yeah.
like?
Is that?
Do you want to just kind of highlight what like my background, community organizing, and John policy, and Jen Michelle all around awesomeness?
Yeah, whatever. Hey, we're gonna take questions, but then remember we talked about that last night, Russ?
Yeah, so I was in
If the questions are
LA
bad,
2 weeks
then-
ago and Las Vegas all of next week.
You have some.
And just busy and not.
All right, let's get
So I'm doing it all at the end of the
get back
day.
to our seats and get started on this.
No, it's worse. Like
Excellent
reading it
panel.
trickle, or like the Band-Aid being ripped off.
Right.
But it's like the Band-Aid being ripped off, and then also being stabbed, and then punched in the face, and like rolled down a hill.
Especially that was a sweet honey bun or something.
Like, thank you.
Come on, get your honey bun.
That'll be perfect while I'm trying to talk.
attention by just getting around with it.
If Justin could get his butt up here on this panel, that'd be helpful. Where is he? Where's Justin?
He's I just saw him. He's grabbing a beverage. I thought.
Okay, because I'm sure I keep yelling at people that I think
He's
are
in the
Justin
room.
that aren't Justin.
This song.
It's your last call for fruit or anything, because I'm getting ready to sit down here now, and I'm gonna get a sweet.
I think he
roll
backed
thing.
out.
I'll tell you if I need anything. You can just get right up. You just hop right up and bring it.
I got a cookie here if you want.
Great turnout.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean,
We had a bigger room upstairs, and much larger than we needed, I'm sure. And somebody else wanted it, so they called me and they were like, "Hey, can you do this room?" And I was like,
Hey, Russ, we're waiting on Justin still.
Justin.
I was like, "Yeah, well, we can."
Where is Justin?
Cram in here. I'm thinking like.
He booked it, man. He heard panel discussion. He
That'll be
booked it.
great.
yeah,
And then, like by this morning, we sold 62 tickets.
of course. I mean, it's always better to fill a room than have a room half empty, even if it's the same number of people. Just ask the president. Or just be like,
Just
I'm
lie.
thrilled that there are 1.5 million people here today.
I don't want to say that. If I weren't,
No, just stick to
if I
alternate
weren't
facts.
trying to be nonpartisan, that would be. Thank you. I'm glad to see 400 of you here this morning. Where?
Pam said she was supposed to be on this. When she sat down, she was like, I thought I was supposed to be on the panel, so do we want to ask Pam to sit on it? Or she's probably not into it at this point.
All right, let's go ahead and get started.
That's
Our
interesting.
next panel
Hey.
discussion
Oh,
is
your mic's not on.
particularly on Virginia policy, and I'll introduce the panel.
Get Pam to come up, please.
What's that?
Yeah, Pam to come up, please.
Okay, Pam.
I think Pam's outside.
Pam outside.
With Justin, probably.
With Justin.
Sorry, some people smoke and they've left.
Yeah, we had
Cigarettes.
another.
Some
Another
people are
panelist,
smoking tobacco.
Well, we'll let them get on panels as they
Sure.
get here, but we want to get this one started, keep on time as best we can. You've already met John Hudak from Brookings Institute. He'll be a part of this panel. Also, of course, Jen Michelle Dini from Executive Director of Virginia NORML. Give it up for Jen Michelle. And we've also got Kevin Mahmalji. He's NORML's National Outreach Coordinator, job I used to hold from 2008 to 2012, and then we took the reins after I left. Give it up for Kevin being here from Denver, Colorado. We'll start off by letting our panelists, broach this topic and give you some of their thoughts on how we're going to focus on Virginia policy, and then we'll open it up for your questions, maybe some questions from me as well. So, Jen, I'll let you start it off.
Oh, good. I get to start? Okay. I certainly wasn't prepared for that. This year is, I feel like this is not loud enough. Is this loud enough?
Yeah.
Should we squeeze?
Should I lean in closer?
Yeah, just-
Hi.
Pull it off the. Yeah, you can hold it.
That's loud. Hey, thanks everyone for coming. It's like 400 or 500 people here, definitely. So this is really interesting this year that we have Lobby Day and our conference coinciding, and we're going to talk all about the actions we're going to take in the General Assembly tomorrow in the afternoon portion of today. But I will give you a little overview and tell you that policy right now is kind of divided into two parts in Virginia. We've got criminal justice reform, and then we've got some medical reform. And we are, year after year, not particularly succeeding with criminal justice reform. We get some really, really minor things like minimal asset forfeiture reforms, and that's probably about it. Some felony levels I think might have changed in recent years. Not necessarily specific to marijuana, but that's the type of criminal justice reforms we really have been seeing historically. This year, however, after trying to get some really small reforms through, like expungement for past crimes and some driver's license reform, we're finally getting traction on that this year. So I think at the end of this session, we'll see some expungement for juveniles, which will be new, and we'll see a lessening of the current penalties for possession charges in in regards to driver's license suspension, which currently is automatic 6 months, and we're trying to eliminate the mandatory factor in that and allow judiciary discretion. And we had great testimony this week twice from Ryan, our membership director, thank you, on that particular bill. And yeah. And it was nice to see that bill come up in a very harsh subcommittee and finally succeed. And we've just never seen anything come out of this subcommittee, and that was really great. So thanks, Ryan. Nice job. So those are really the types of reforms that we will achieve this year realistically. We've seen a bunch of decriminalization bills, and that's a nice conversation to have. But in order for us to really advance a type of decriminalization bill, it would need to be Republican introduced. And to really do that type of reform to Virginia code requires a study. So the study that you've heard been talked about a lot is a decrim study requested by the Senate Majority Leader. Hey, Justin, want to join us? And it's not a study about studying marijuana. It's about studying how other states have reformed their code to reflect this policy change in their state laws, and what impact states have received in reference to their federal funding. Virginia is ranked number 2 in the nation on the federal funds that we receive, and I'm sure we'd like to be number 1. So they're not, ever going to pass laws that are in gross contradiction with federal laws that would jeopardize any funding that they're going to lose. So in order for that to happen, we really do require this study. It's done by the Crime Commission, requests it, and then JLARC executes it, as we are just now learning how this is actually going to happen. And I think that that'll be accepted, and we'll have the study over this year, and then next year, hopefully, that will mean we'll have a Republican-introduced decriminalization bill. I don't know that it would necessarily succeed in its first year, but it would be nice to have them asking for it and really be able to get some movement on it. On the medical side, we've had really great success, which, if you're looking at it from the public's perspective, doesn't necessarily look fantastic. But if you're one of those patients, it's really everything. In 2015, we passed an affirmative defense, which means you get a piece of paper signed by your doctor, and if you get arrested, then you can present your certificate as your defense, and they'll accept it. They may accept it. It's a reasonable defense. You can provide that, and it worked. So right now, epilepsy patients and their caregivers in Virginia can get this certificate, and they can possess cannabis oil that is a minimum of 15% CBD and a maximum of 5% THCA. So that's THC straight out of the plant that has not been heated up to become psychoactive. And it's been good, but the good thing is that patients can get can have these oils and avoid prosecution, but they don't have any way to get it. Right. So in 2016, we came back and said, can we let producers have an affirmative defense also? Because if you can have the defense to possess it, now we can give the defense to produce it. So these fought, and they said, sure, okay, let's go ahead and write the regulatory process for that for 5 sites, because there's 5 health districts in Virginia, so it would be one site per district. It's interesting. Basically, you're looking to ensure a felonious business model, but it's succeeded in other states, and it's acceptable, and we have people willing to take that risk. But realistically, like in any other state, they could certainly be raided and even be arrested by their own state. But this succeeded in 2016, and they said, yes, go ahead and meet with the Board of Pharmacy and write this program, and we did that. And now it's back before the General Assembly this year so that they can look at the regulations and say that they still agree with it, and then we'll pass it. And the really fantastic thing about that is that as soon as we pass this bill through the House, it's already succeeded through the Senate. As soon as we pass that bill and it gets signed, that's day one of the legal marijuana industry in Virginia. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point, right? So that's kind of a big deal. I mean, it looks like it's not a big deal because it doesn't necessarily apply to you personally as a consumer immediately, but it is a big deal in that once you have the industry presence, then we're going to look at, we'll have money there to advance legislation, and really that does help. We had another company come in, a capital investment group come in and help advance this legislation. And they are actually not sticking around to get a license, but it was nice of them to come in and help, and it really does. So it's exciting to think that we'll have, a fledgling industry and then other outside industry influence looking to come in and will be giving us money as a state to make that happen. Yeah, so I think that's about where we are with Virginia. Who wants to go next? Want to go next? You're kind of like Virginia. We'll go in the
Virginia. All right. All right. Well, hey everyone. Apologies for stepping in a minute late. My name is Justin. I'm the political director for National NORML, and I started off getting involved in marijuana policy when I was working in Virginia in 2014 for a state senator who was running for Congress at the time. And is it sounding weird to anyone else? All right. I'll just talk loudly. So I started off working for state senator Adam. Oh yeah, I gotta do that. All right. I don't know why that is, but sorry. Hello. Okay, there we go. So I started with State Senator Adam Ebbett on his congressional campaign, and NORML came in and endorsed my candidate. And the theory of change behind that decision, not only because he was the candidate in the race who had the best position on marijuana of those running and had the most demonstrated commitment to the liberalization of policy to ending prohibition. It was because he was a state senator. And now, 3 months later, after the election he lost, I went back to work for him as a legislative aide here in Virginia. And we introduced the decriminalization bill, which, it's very similar to what unfortunately just failed last year. But it got, like Jen Michelle was talking about, Senate Leader Tommy Norment to start thinking about it, to start constructively thinking about it. And every week when Senator Norment would make the Courts of Justice docket for what was going to get votes, I would go sit outside his office, and every week he would walk up and it was like marijuana jargon boggle. And he would come up with some little pithy little line about, oh, well, Justin, I don't know if this is the week that we're going to get the Colorado gold rush, or, I don't know, Justin, if the good people of Virginia are ready for that Rocky Mountain High. And I'm just like, Senator, I appreciate your concerns, but I really do believe that, it would be great if we could have a hearing next week on the decriminalization of marijuana, if only to start the dialogue about whether or not people should go to jail here for mere possession. So, that was 2 years ago. And this is a state that is the last state to change anything. And I just want to applaud you guys, and it's because of the access that you have from simply showing up. And a lot of, I've worked on political campaigns for 10 years. I've worked on a number of different issues. I was just doing tax policy and wage policy for the last 2 years. And when it comes to actual legislative change, which is what every single person in this room here wants, the only way that happens in any field is if it's on front and center of the mind of the elected officials and their staffers. Because at the end of the day, an elected official is only the person who says things and hires staff and tells those, and those staff are the ones who present the elected official the options and the information of, the ramifications of their actions and their votes and their policy proposals. So you showing up demonstrates power. And when there's fewer and fewer people and you're winning public opinion like John was talking about, and you're organizing lobby days like you guys are all here today, you're keeping it front and center, you're keeping the conversation going, you're gonna rack up wins this year on medical issues, as long as you guys stick to that this year, because that's what we can win this year, which will be good. And then that just opens more doors for the future. So thank you guys all so much for coming out. So I think you guys should give yourself another round of applause, because we all like feeling good, right? So thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you very much, Justin. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Mahmalji. I'm the National Outreach Coordinator for NORML. I'm here today. I'm from Denver, Colorado, but I was invited out here to join you guys for your lobby day and conference. I'm here really to offer support and guidance from a professional community organizer standpoint. My background is in electoral politics. So like Justin, I traveled the country working on various campaigns in different states. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to provide you guys with the tools and everything that you need to be successful while you're lobbying your state representatives tomorrow. So that's pretty much it. Also, I'm going to be on hand, I guess. I talked to Jen Michelle about this yesterday, but being that I've been in Colorado since 2009, I've witnessed the entire progression of the legalization movement. I also worked in the industry for a year and a half, and I worked with state regulators and city regulators to implement the adult use program there. So that being said, hopefully I could supplement your efforts or at least provide insight tomorrow while we're at the Capitol regarding some of the things, how it's working in Colorado. So, yeah.
You guys heard me talk already for a half hour, so I'll be very brief. But what I will say is I think one of the benefits that an organization like this also provides is not just training on how to lobby, training on refining your message and how to talk about different issues to different legislators or constituencies, but it's also to learn about how your state government works. And this seems very basic, but I was giving a talk in Nevada a few days ago, the day before yesterday, and before my talk, there were other conversations and other presentations in the room, and it was for an organization, not a NORML chapter, but a different organization. And the things people were saying, that the members were saying, was just a fundamental lack of understanding about how Nevada state government functions. And I think for people who have lived in the Silver State their entire lives, you may be embarrassed to admit that you don't know how your state government works, but state governments are very complicated processes, institutions, and it takes a lot to thoroughly and fully understand the nuances and the written rules, and then more importantly, the unwritten rules. And then getting your message right is equally important. And so this group, they were like, if we accomplish one thing in the legislative session this year. Now, in Nevada, the legislature meets for 4 months every 2 years. That's it. They were like, if we get one thing this year, it should be to get rid of the cap on how much marijuana you should be able to buy at one time. And people were like, yes, that's our issue. And I was like, that's not your goddamn issue. What is wrong with you people? That's what you're gonna fight for in Carson City? How do you think that's a winning proposal? Your regulatory system is a mess. There's a lot to be accomplished in Nevada, and that's what you wanna fight for? And to the credit of the director of the organization, she was like, we're gonna take all of this information and all of these concerns, and but I mean, there was just, A, that's not happening. B, it was too late to propose the legislation to do it anyways. And so I think when you're at sessions like these, it's okay to admit your own ignorance. I live in Virginia. I don't know a damn thing about how this state government works. I lived, as I said before, in Tennessee for 6 years. That was a whole other ball of wax that took me about 6 years to figure out how it worked. Connecticut before that, another weird state. All three of those states function very differently, even though it's a state assembly, a state senate, a governor. They should all work the same, right? No, they don't. And so organizations like these need to train you on the issue and on lobbying, but also on institutional organization and function just as much. Oh, and now we'll open for questions? Yes. Excellent.
Let's get some questions. For our panel.
Okay, so the question was, for the oil program, where will the oil come from? At the 5 sites, well, I mean, we won't necessarily have 5 sites. We may start only with 1. But they will grow, process, test, and dispense at that facility. There'll be competition, but I don't know what the realistic competition, I don't know what the field really looks like yet. I kind of have my ideas that it'll be the same that you kind of saw around Maryland. It'll be similar to that action, but this is much more restrictive. So you're taking a huge risk. Yeah, it really is capital intensive, and you're definitely looking at zero profit for years 1 through 3, and you got to be ready to, fill it yourself for 5. But I don't know how competitive hyper restrictive markets have been in recent years. Do you? It's entirely possible that we'll come online with just one producer first, and then another one will get its approval. I don't know that we'll necessarily have 5 approved all at once. It'll be interesting to see how this comes together. Yeah, that's part. So the bill was a 2-year bill, and the first year of the bill called for us to draft the regulations, which happened, and then now it's back before them, and they can vote to enact them, and they will. No, I think there's options. I don't think it's closed off at all. I think that you simply have to be prepared with capital. Like there's a lot of answers. There's a lot of answers. I'm trying to think which one I want to pick. To take local action, the quickest thing you can do is go to vanormal.org/act and complete all of those action alerts right there. That's literally the fastest way to send emails today in less than 2 minutes to your state senator and state delegate. The next best thing you can do is call them. The next best thing you can do is go visit them, and you can visit them at the General Assembly, you can visit them in their district, which is where they live with you, and you can visit them at events around the state, generally affiliated with their party. And that's really it. Talking to your lawmakers is the most powerful thing you can do.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty comprehensive thing, but I think as far as what you can do that'd be most impactful, build relationships, like look to your left, look to your right, build relationships with the people in this room, because we are always stronger together when we're standing together. And by being able to demonstrate that we have built political power is by, those action alerts, them getting the emails, them getting the phone calls, them getting your visits, and not just have it be a one-off thing. Build relationships with your legislators. Build relationships, another thing that's incredibly important, build relationships with the reporters for your local paper. Because if one thing politicians do every single day is furiously Google themselves. So if they get news alerts saying, you constituent stopped at their office to go talk to them about this policy, and because you had built a relationship with the reporter, they're giving it a couple column inches, then that's gonna stick with them for a long time. And that's one of the best ways to get their attention, because politicians, ultimately all they want to do is get reelected and be liked, right? So give them the opportunity to be liked by you, and one of the best ways to do that is by generating relationships with the local media. And again, I cannot stress this enough, like build relationships with the people next to you, learn from what they've done, share what you've done, learn from, tell them every terrible experience you've had, because I guarantee you the most embarrassing experience you've ever had is way better than what another person who might want to get involved in this advocacy space thinks is a regular occurrence. So just kind of like help break down the barriers and the fears to entry to civic participation with your neighbors, with, with the legislative aides that you talk to, with the reporters, to continue the conversation. Because again, I keep on going back to what John was saying, like, we've already won public opinion. Now we need to capitalize off of that to bring about the legislative change that we, as people who want to be consumer advocates, to advocate on behalf of patients, to be advocate on behalf of those who are incarcerated or those who are being discriminated against. We have the momentum, and we just need to properly capitalize off of it.
So one bit of advice I would have, and this is true of any policy area, I assume several of you are interested in reforming not only cannabis policy, but other policies that affect your lives. One thing to do is get to elected officials early in their career, when they're at the lower level. It would have been easier to talk to someone, well, maybe this is a bad example, but someone like Ken Cuccinelli, for instance. It's easier to talk to him when he's a county commissioner than when he's a candidate for governor. And within that, identify people who, so I'm a political scientist, what we call progressive ambition, people who have ambition for higher office. Sometimes you look at people and they're happy being a county commissioner or a mayor or whatever, and then hanging it up. They don't have it in them to run for something higher. And then you run into a county commissioner or a board of ed member or someone like that, and you're like, there's a woman who's going to run for Congress in the next 5 years or 10 years. You see it, you get that feeling. Well, start talking to them about marijuana policy or whatever policy you're focused on. And there's two benefits to that. One, it's easier to get someone on record when they're in a low-level position than trying to get them on record for the first time in a higher-level position. And two, you start exposing them to information on a topic that they are probably not dealing with on a daily basis. Because let's be honest, marijuana policy is not a local issue. It is a state and a federal issue. And so if you start exposing them to that information, you begin to win the information war. There has been an information war on cannabis policy since the 1920s, which has been full of disinformation, misinformation, and lies. And as that starts to fade, the first person to get a state legislator's ear probably has that state legislator's ear before he or she is a state legislator. And so exposing them to that information early means that you will be a reliable resource to them later on, and that when they are faced with competing views or competing versions, they're not going to immediately agree with the person who's throwing nonsense at them, but they'll at least come back to you or someone like you or an organization like this and say, this is what I heard from a constituent, or this is what I got a letter about. Can you help me out here? Because ultimately, some people will have entrenched views on this, and other people are going to be intellectually curious. And I think intellectual curiosity about cannabis policy is increasing among elected officials in a way that 20 years ago was totally non-existent.
So yeah, going last year, I think everybody's pretty much covered everything up to this point, but just to add a couple things, I think it's important that we engage our lawmakers, even at the city council level. I know in my case, living in the city of Denver, I'm able to keep tabs on state level legislation just through the communication that I have with my city council member. And so I think that's, some low-hanging fruit for us to consider when you get back into your city or county, wherever you're from in Virginia. Immediately start contacting your local electeds and your state representatives and introduce yourself and let them know where you stand on the pending legislation. It's a great way to begin that conversation, and it also it allows there to be some type of a relationship, because I think where local lobbying efforts sometimes fail is because your state representative has never heard from you ever in their entire life, and then you show up one day out of the year and you say, I want the world, give it to me. And so it's just kind of hard for them to buy in and believe and have that dialogue with you if there's no relationship. So another tip that I would that I suggest for you guys is diversifying beyond marijuana. So this was actually a city council member in Denver. She's an ally, I'll say that, but she during a council meeting that I was having with her, she became frustrated because all I was meeting with her about was marijuana. And she said, Kevin, I appreciate your advocacy and your passion for this issue, but I would like to see you come in here and be concerned about public transportation or the homelessness in our city. Diversify your issues, because you may not be able to connect with that representative or that council member right away on marijuana, But if you could say, hey, I love, pedestrian access or bike lanes or whatever, that might be some common ground that you can establish with your lawmaker, and then you could pivot into the marijuana stuff. So.
All right, we're at 11:45 on our schedule, which is our designated time to take a break. We'll get that taken care of so that Kevin can get his presentation set up. He'll be starting up at noon on his presentation on taking local action, and then our lunch will be at 1. So we got a 15-minute break here, and one more comment?
Yeah, one more thing. Win where you can get it. And this session, there are a lot of wins that are very, very achievable. I know a lot of the folks normal this year is number for next year in the future.
Hey, Justin. Hey, how many actions do we have on the decrim alert?
You guys have the most actions of any state chapter of NORML in the country this year so far.
Yeah.
You have engaged over 5,000 individuals to contact their local officials just the last 4 weeks.
All right.
So congratulations.
All right, let's take our break, and we'll start right back up top of the hour.
This is yours.
Oh, thank you. I already bought your book.
But it's for
Oh, it was just the prop one?
Yeah.
Wasn't a gift.
Well,
No,
you
here's
know,
your
it
book.
depends
Here's your
on how
book
you
back.
define a gift.
Well,
Right,
I was like,
exactly.
oh, well, I think
There's
the
a clicker
gift.
for you.
Thanks for the gift. I
perfect. Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
Okay.
Oh,
Sounds good.
Thanks a ton for the invitations.
thank you.
Proud am I?
Yeah, so you gave us such good.
Hey, folks, if you'd like to get a signed copy of John's book, he'll be autographing some copies of the book. They'll be right out there. Got to do it now because he's got to take off. So if you want a signed copy of Marijuana, A Short History, do it now. All right, everybody, it's noon time. Let's get things back on the track. This will be our last presentation before we hit the lunch hour, which will be from 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock. And at the tail end of that lunch hour, if you come in a little early, I'm going to be playing my marijuana trivia game. So if you want to possibly win a cool prize, I don't know what the cool prizes are yet. We'll figure out what the cool prizes are. But if you want to win a cool prize, come back from lunch early. We'll play some marijuana trivia. It'll be a lot of fun. All right, for this presentation, we'd like to welcome back to the podium the National Outreach Coordinator for NORML from Denver, Colorado. It's Kevin Mahmalji.
Everybody vacated the room because I was up next. Is this on? Hello? Oh. Okay. All right, yeah, the mustache. Yeah, absolutely. So the mustache story, I normally look 12, but I decided to look 15 for you guys to look a little bit more mature, so I didn't shave my mustache. As Russ said, and as I mentioned just a minute ago with the panel discussion, my name's Kevin Mahmalji, and I'm the National Outreach Coordinator for NORML. Primary focus in my day-to-day is to offer support to our existing network of chapters while establishing new chapters around the country. So today I'm here to talk about a few things, just really run through a quick presentation, if you will. I discuss some of the local action items that we could be focusing our efforts on, but I'll also provide an update. So without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. Kevin Mahmalji. So NORML, new day at NORML. How do you quick down on national organization? So for hired a new executive director His name is Eric Altari. He's not new to the organization. He's been with the he was with the organization for several years before going to another organization and then returning to NORML to be the executive director. That was towards the end of last year. It's really exciting. Everyone on staff is excited just because of his knowledge of action alerts and engaging elected officials on the state level, which is something that me as the chapter outreach coordinator needed severely, was more support in that area. So to further that support, or to increase that support, we brought on Justin Streakel, who's our political director, who you guys all know. Justin's doing a fantastic job really helping us out with all the legislative alerts, all those alerts. That's this man right here. So he's on top of the legislation around the country. Last time I checked, we have roughly 35 action alerts. And I checked just a couple days ago, so in a couple days it's gone up to 44 action alerts. So we're working hard to track legislation around the country to support you guys in our NORML chapters by encouraging these action alerts that we send around. In addition to the new hires that we have at NORML, we hit the ground running this year in 2017 with the hope of capitalizing off of the victories in 2016. We launched a coordinated effort for our chapters around the country for a Citizen Lobby Day. Currently, we have 26 chapters that will be meeting with lawmakers on the issue of marijuana reform. So we're really, really excited about that. In years past, there was several organizations hosting lobby days around the country, but there was no coordinated effort. So with this new coordinated effort, we're providing our chapters with a lobby guide and talking points and other tools that they could use to be successful on their lobby day. And then also, of course, we've been busy hammering away at Jeff Sessions. Justin could hop in here if I have my information wrong, but his hearing, the vote was delayed. The committee vote was delayed until this Tuesday. So we still have time to hammer away at Jeff Sessions. I have a telephone number here to the United States Senate switchboard. Please, if you have time, contact the office and encourage them to vote no for Senator Sessions in confirmation hearing. And this has been a really big push. I like to think that we've had a part in the delay. I know the women's marches around the country last weekend really had influenced the decision to postpone this hearing. But we, NORML, and Justin probably, he has more accurate numbers, but 25,000 action alerts on, or actions for Senator Sessions. So we're definitely putting the pressure on. And also in that fight is DPA, Drug Policy Alliance, and Americans for Safe Access. And I'm sure there's others, but those are the other two nonprofits that are fighting against the confirmation of Senator Jeff Sessions. So in my spare time, I like to put my cats in it. I thought I'd throw this up there just to make you laugh, because it makes me laugh. I also make those cats in. And I'll give you my business card so we can get you one. So we had a huge year last year with 7 of the 8 ballot initiatives approved around the country. The only that was Arizona, of course, but the fight isn't over. Unfortunately, in all the states, or in majority of the states that adopted adult use measures or medical marijuana measures this last year, they're being delayed by state legislatures around the country. So I just wanted to go through these real quick just to give everybody an update on where we are. Because again, a lot of people are under the impression that, yay, we won, but yet there's still work to be done. So we have created action alerts in these various states, encouraging activists and our members to contact their lawmakers to not delay the implementation of these programs. And the one thing that most of these, all of them actually, it's really focused on delaying the implementation. So things such as personal possession, you're still allowed to possess whatever the initiative allows each state. The delay is really focused on things such as purchasing limits, zoning regulations, all the business side of these initiatives. And so it's a little concerning because when you look at it from a marijuana advocacy group, we're always looking out for increasing access. And so it's troubling that we're having to deal with these delays. Because if you look at other political issues, I can't think of one that is adopted by the voters and then the state legislature goes in and delays. Like, I can't think of time in my life that's happened. But it's caught on like wildfire with these state initiatives. So Arkansas issue 6, state lawmakers voted to delay implementation for 60 days with House Bill 1026. Governor Hutchinson signed the bill into law on Tuesday, January 24th. I guess that was this week. All of this is very current because, again, state legislative sessions just ramped up. So that's why a lot of this is fairly new information. North Dakota, a big surprise for a lot of people in the reform movement, me especially, to pop on the map there. But their state lawmakers voted to extend the window for implementation by roughly 5 months with SB 2154. It was submitted to the governor for approval on Tuesday, and it's pending its governor's signature. Montana Initiative I-182. Due to a drafting error that effectively delayed implementation until July 2017, lawmakers have introduced SB 131 to fix the language to reflect the will of the voters. This is one of the different ones because they're actually trying to move the date up instead of owning it in July 2017. Florida Amendment 2. State lawmakers have introduced SB 406 that will codify Amendment 2 by establishing perimeters for physicians, treatment of minors, yearly examinations for medical marijuana patients, and caregiver registry. Last time I checked, they will have access, very limited access to medical marijuana in Florida in roughly 90 days, but that could change. It really depends on how fast the state legislature works to get some of the stuff implemented. That was all the medical, and then focusing on the adult use or recreational marijuana initiatives that we passed in California's Proposition 64. State lawmakers voted to delay the program with HB. Yeah, no, I apologize. That's yeah, that's from. Yeah, California's moving forward with my knowledge. There's been no delays on the state level, but they have had tons of municipalities around the state either ban or impose moratoriums on the commercial production of marijuana. We saw something similar in the state of Colorado. That's one of the keys to these legalization efforts is including local control. So municipalities have the opportunity to opt out if they decide not to participate. But again, that doesn't affect possession or anything like that. So you possess in these counties that have banned or imposed moratoriums, but there will be no production, cultivation, or anything. Massachusetts question 2. The governor endorsed a 6-month delay on retail marijuana sales, implementation, supporting marijuana legislation, and the start of a recreational marijuana sales program by January 2008. Again, that was one of the first ones out of the gate. Massachusetts and Maine. Maine was the first one. They immediately challenged the results of the outcome of the election. But Maine question 1, state lawmakers recently submitted LD 88, an emergency legislative document that will delay the retail sales of marijuana until February 1st, 2018. It recently went to public hearing and expected to pass. It did pass. On a policy, I'm glad that we have our political director here to update it on the fly. So yeah, it did pass. So as you can see, we made a tremendous amount of progress during last year's election, but due to state legislatures, wanting to put up one last fight, I guess, they're delaying the implementation. A lot of them are giving different reasons to study. We need to find out more information, but it's just stall tactics. So we're going to continue to hammer away at these states and hopefully get their programs up and sooner than later. So a large part of what I do is community organizing on the local level. I have done stuff on the state level and the federal level. Well, my day-to-day, most part, prior to working with, I was involved in local politics level. So I just wanted to throw this quote in there because it resonates with me. Community organizing is all about building grassroots support. It's about identifying the people around you with create a common, passionate cause, and it's about ignoring conventional company politics instead of playing the game by very. That's who we are as Americans. Can't adhere to traditional strategy politics that have been embraced for so many years. We have to break outside of that mold and get our own path, and I think that's where we've seen a lot of success as a movement. That we're doing away with traditional politics and that we're taking this. So I think that's where last few feeling empowered as a people. Information is out there. John stated several times we have won public opinion, so it's really up to us to run with it. Grassroots model. Laboratory democracy. Often what you hear people refer to states, local governments, and their ability to act independently of the federal government. And it's a reference to our 10th Amendment, essentially saying that the federal government delegates day-to-day governing powers to states or municipalities. One of the things specifically stated is police duty. So I think looking at what we're doing as an organization, as activists fighting for marijuana reforms, this is true. I personally believe it's going to be quite some time before we see some traction with meaningful reforms on the federal level. So we're going to have to continue to focus on state by state, chipping away at the war on marijuana so that we can end programs. And it's been successful. And with this state by state strategy, with every state that passes, it creates pressure on neighboring states to consider doing something on their own. For example, we saw Maine and Massachusetts pass legalization, and immediately following the campaign or the election, several representatives from neighboring states came out with, tossing around the idea of looking at tackling this issue legislatively. And so that's why we have 5 adult use bills pending in state houses around the country. So that's really exciting. We're fighting hard in Delaware, Connecticut. We have chapters that are in tune and working with folks on the ground to get. But that would be exciting because everything up to this point on the adult use side of things has been done through ballot initiative. So local reform efforts have consequences. So a lot of what we do on the local level, a lot of what we can do on the local level will translate to change at the state level and at the federal level. If you look at any social justice rights, equality, they all started on. From there, they grew into movements that caught the attention of statewide activists, national movements. So there's a lot of potential on the local level for us to fight for. Most specifically, I know this doesn't really apply here. Criminalization is proving to be a really useful strategy or a tool for our activists around the country. Even in states that don't have or aren't very promising or appealing to most reform activists, say Tennessee, for example. Nothing against the good people in Tennessee, but we've struggled to make headway on the state level. And so we've reached out to our chapters in Nashville and Memphis, and they recently passed decriminalization measures. Following the passage of the measures, the governor of the state released a statement saying that he was not going to allow these cities to. So the point is it's already bringing the conversation from Memphis, Nashville to the state house. So that's where I think a lot of us had the question earlier: what can we do to change things in our community? Well, just getting involved. Typically, like I just touched on, a lot of success with that around the. Like looking at how it didn't just all of them. It didn't start with. It started through decriminalization measures. Colorado, for example, 2005 was the first decriminalization measure passed. They came back in 2000. Made it a little bit better, and now we have recreational adult use in Colorado. Same thing in Maine. 2013, Portland, Maine adopted decriminalization measure. Now Maine 2017 has legal. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. Work diligently, and then it'll. Same thing in Denver, Colorado. The states that adopted it in 2012 and 2014, they didn't include public consumption. So basically, you have people traveling to Colorado, they have nowhere to consume marijuana, and they're getting tickets for. It's a big problem for marijuana consumers. So our Denver chapter decided to push a private club model that would essentially establish private clubs in the city of Denver. There was no conversations happening. No state representative wasn't on their radar whatsoever. But as marijuana consumers, we were perplexed because people literally come to Colorado to buy marijuana and they ask bud tenders, "Where do I go smoke this?" I don't know, the alley. I mean, that's the situation, and it's not good for anyone, right? It's not good for the not good for the city to have people smoking in public areas. So Denver NORML pushed that's Keith, our founder. I just thought that represented social use. Even though he's alone, like by himself, but yeah, social use. Okay, well, just imagine people socially smoking that joint, and he's passing it. Yeah, there you go. So anyways, the Denver, although they failed, they didn't make the ballot. They had to, I believe the threshold was 7,000 signatures. They fell short by just 1,000 or 2,000. But the state legislature is now looking at this issue. That was last year when Denver NORML pushed the private club model. This year, there's already 2 bills introduced at the state house for private marijuana clubs. So again, a perfect illustration or an example of how local action translates into state action. What we do on the local level is really important. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people face the fame and lights of, but there's too much work done on the local level. And honestly, on the local level, you don't have the amount. John touched on this, and I believe Justin touched on this as well. The politics, the level of politicking that is required to make headway at the state house is so much more than what's needed to make progress on the level with council members. So that's another big thing as activists that we need to be mindful of, is that we don't have to go through, for the most part, you don't have to go through the hurdles and all the politicking and everything that they go through at the state capitol. I mean, half the states in this country, or half the cities, there's no laws governing local lobbying. So you don't even have to go into the city of Denver and register as a lobbyist. You could just go and meet with the council member. Again, another obstacle faced with the state capitol, their mandatory reporting and registrations and all that other stuff for lobbyists. So the opportunity to get involved in the local. And then drug testing. This is an asking NORML. They'll send us emails or write on our Facebook wall, and they'll say, well, what's NORML going to do now that marijuana is legal? You guys should be out of business, like just close the door. It's not the case. There's so much work to be done, and that's where we're focusing some of our attention. In these states that have legal marijuana, of course our chapters can't continue to hammer away at legalization because it's legal. So what they are doing is focusing on reforming drug testing across the country. So we have chapters in California, Oregon, Colorado, Washington State that have all joined, put together, formed a coalition that is going to be tackling the drug testing issue. And why I have it here, because, so again, state level lobbying is incredibly difficult because for the most part you have to amend an already existing state law, or if you're introducing a new law, it has to be compatible with laws on the book, or there has to be a reconciliation process. We, in this coalition talking about drug testing, we started this coalition with the idea of pushing a model or a template to different state legislatures that would allow lawmakers to create protections for marijuana consumers their job, right? Marijuana is legal. We shouldn't be firing people that smoke a joint on the weekend and come to work on Monday. Happening. So we've decided, after executive directors, they made the decision they want to abandon the statewide strategy and focus on local issues. Because after doing some research on the issue of drug testing in the workplace, we found out that there's 26 cities across the United States that has language that protects marijuana consumers and their job. A lot of that's medical, of course, but point is, it's working on the local level. The city of Boulder has had an ordinance in place for more than 20 years that protects marijuana consumers, their job. And so it makes sense for us, given the advantages to local lobbying, not having all the obstacles to get involved. It's much easier for us in this coalition to introduce a template on the local level. Again, it just bypasses all the politicking and the need to work with state legislators. So just another example of work that we can do on the local level that will in return have an impact on statewide and federal efforts. Because everything we're doing with the employee drug testing on the local level, it will eventually be adopted in state legislature and by template for federal lawmakers does advance Congress offer framework. I did because, as John mentioned earlier, every state, every municipality is incredibly different in how laws are amended and how you can advocate. So I want to bring up Cindy Cutler. To talk about a decriminalization. And join. We're going to hear from these folks, and again, this is going to be more about specific efforts, local efforts here in Virginia.
Hi. This on? Hi, Cindy Cutler out of Norfolk, and I just want to say thank you, all of you, for being here today. But really, all I can say from a local standpoint is just to get to know your legislators, just to start going where they are, and they are, you know, they're out every night, so you can find them. And just start talking about it. Start saying the word cannabis or marijuana. 3.5 years ago, I started meeting legislators, and the first time I said the word marijuana, they were throwing their hands up and falling back, and now they are finally listening and leaning in. So I would just say, have the conversation, go to events where you can publicly ask a question. I was just at a town hall for our local senator, our state senator, and he saw the support in the room. I was actually quite surprised. Most people were my age and older, and when I brought up the whole decrim topic, I got almost a standing room ovation. I mean, people were very, very supportive. So when our local legislators see those questions asked in a public format and they see the support, that's when we get change. So just taking the fear out of it, I think, is a lot of it, and just talking to your friends. I'm very active on social media, and when I first started posting, I might get 1 or 2 likes, and I just, you know, people say, what can I do to help? And I say, like my post, share my post. You know, those little things, that little bit of activism makes a difference.
My name's Andy Ludwig. I've been with NORML for about 4 years and the director of Northern Virginia NORML for about 2. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we did recently that can work in many places around Virginia. And basically what started this effort was trying to figure out represent the community. You know, we all have mayors and city councils all over the place, but what groups do they respond to? Largest organizations in their districts that they have to listen to. And as I was thinking about that, but also how can I grow the Northern Virginia chapter and out to more people? One that I came across was a federation of neighborhood associations. So in Arlington, every little neighborhood association has a representative, and they all come together for the Arlington County Civic Federation. So I thought it'd be a great way to kind of find out what's going on, what policies do they care about? Can we find people? We get our representatives to listen. And so the way we eventually got our message across to them was to have to go kind of slowly with them and find out how they work and work within their system. So about a year and a half ago, started going to a couple meetings. They're open to the public because that's the type of body's about. The lay of the land and figure out who are the key people. Figured out how to join, or at least make Nova NORML a member. And basically, you're not going to do anything unless you're a member. So what's your membership criteria? How do we become part of it? What really helped, and so also try to make allies, find people who are likely sympathetic to our cause, and it helped that the president of the organization is definitely pointing me in the right direction. So that moved things along. And one thing I would tell you about a lot of organizations like these, that they need new blood. A lot of times it's filled with a lot of older people, younger people, or new organizations that come in with a cause. They like it. They want you to become part of it. And so it's really easy. Northern Virginia member. I think they vote on everything, and something like 40-2 something passed that would be a member of the organization. And one thing I did as we approached this, I mentioned that Northern Virginia NORML is very public health oriented. I made sure that we only have one policy. You know, this affects a lot of different ways that are related to public health, and I think that got some more. But so once we were on board, I waited a couple more moments to figure out, okay, how does this that we can influence policy and state issues that we care about, what the way within that federation make a resolution, urge your representatives to act in a certain way. And so I joined the legislative committee who work on these types of resolutions that urge vote or make this a priority. Introduced it back in October. November did a formal presentation of the issue, and I was hoping December we'd pass and send letters to everybody that we're trying to go see tomorrow. Well, there was pushback that I didn't expect. Honestly, we kind of asked for everything that our biggest priorities. We asked for everything in this. Some people aren't ready for that. Arlington, there's still a lot of conservative people, and they weren't ready to go full decrim. And in that first meeting, all the critics stood up and made their points and made a motion to back to committee for further consideration. Lost 20-21. If I had brought two friends, it would have been moving along. But in the big picture, I'm glad that happened, because rather than what some of them would down their throats, what we did and what I recommend all of you in the process is then reach out to your critics. Find out what would you. I basically went to said make edits to what would you like to see. Oh man, it was red lines all over the place, but she supports medical, as we've talked about. 80-85% of people support medical. So at the end of the day, it was really it's very limited, but saying, hey, legislator, we urge you to investigate what kind of medical system could work in Virginia. That, we're not writing the laws, we're just saying, hey, priority. I also got her to add a little bit more, adding affirmative defense for patients, critical areas. Just adding a little bit of the criminal justice. Sent that back. So she basically wrote this new resolution. Our biggest critic got two of the other critics. I said, hey, what do you think? But that's something I could support. So then in this January, came to the full board meeting. It was actually in front of our city council, as it turned out. Had a discussion, and everyone, critics stood up saying, you know what? Change the bill to what we care about. Support it now. We had about 3-4 people stand up for that, and others just say, we asked our neighborhood association, never had a response like this.
This is CNET, and here are the stories that matter right now. Samsung revealed the cause of the Galaxy Note 7
just want to know when you start growing weed.
overheating problem that affected both the original Note 7 and the revised replacement units. In both, manufacturers
Ultimately, it passed 50-1. One guy
and flaws forced the positive and negative layers inside the batteries together, which forced them to short circuit.
So the Arlington County Civic Federation.
The short circuiting could lead to fires. A photo and a tweet may have revealed the look and release date of Samsung's Galaxy S8. Blogger Evan Blass, who has a reliable track record of leaking information on unannounced phones, tweeted a picture he claims is the Galaxy S8. He also suggested a release date of March 29, 2017. When contacted, Samsung declined to comment. According to the New York Times, President Trump is actively using
all they care about is consent. So
an unsecure Android phone, which is vulnerable to attacks. The reports say the president apparently keeps the
gain allies, as we know, find out others who
device near him to tweet from the White House while he watches television. The Secret Service has provided a secure phone with limited capabilities that could include the ability to tweet. For the first time since the year 2000, Microsoft's market share rose to above $500 billion. The company announced its financial information and beat analyst estimates for both profit and revenue. Stay up to date with the latest by downloading the CNET Tech Today app in the Apple App Store.
It'll be easy to go back in a couple months, and something similar, move it a little bit farther with this organization who then are lawmakers. So I hope you all do the same in your areas.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, thank you, everyone, for your patience. We're just about to wrap up here on the local effort, what you can do to affect marijuana policy or change in your community. So a lot of us
it's a nightmare all too familiar for Windows users. You're in the middle of a project, and without
shared with us their experience on the local level. We have to
warning, it strikes the dreaded automatic updates. Windows suddenly restarts your computer, and
to have an impact on what's being.
You can't stop it. If you didn't save your work, it's toast. The unstoppable update
Denver, Colorado, routinely.
Is one of the biggest complaints about Windows, and you can always find people griping about it on Twitter. But Microsoft hails
and from what I understand, talking to Jen Michelle, you guys have something similar.
The forceful restart as a good feature that keeps your computer secure. There are some things you can do to prevent the unwanted surprise. In settings, you can schedule a 12-hour window of time when the
beginning of each
computer will not automatically restart. This off-limits time is called active hours. Go to settings, click Update and Security, and select Change Active Hours. By default, it's set to not restart on you between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., but you can stretch this out to a 12-hour time frame. You won't be able to avoid
or medical expansion as part of their recommendations
restart indefinitely, and you need to have your computer on outside of active hours.
Legislative session's already started here in Virginia. They've already received their recommendations. So
Windows will pop up a notification that it's going to restart on you later in the day when active hours is over.
So when you get back into your hometown,
if you catch that pop-up, you can go into restart options and push it back by 6 days.
Walk you through the process, because the number one thing that we can do is contact our council members
at a certain time. The only guaranteed way of not being surprised is to just check for updates regularly and restart it yourself. But if you use active hours, maybe you can prevent a restart during your typical busy time. For CNET, I'm Bridget Carey, wishing all Windows users the best of luck. And remember, save your work.
So that's it. Next up. So yeah, I'll do a couple questions.
I just want.
Netflix woke up to a not-so-nice surprise after discovering its official Twitter account had been compromised. A tweet reading, quote, "Hey, it's Armine. Don't worry, we are just testing your security. Contact us to tell you more about that," unquote, was posted to the Netflix Twitter account along with the group's email address. Self-described white hat hacker group Ourmine claimed responsibility for the hack.
Prior to
posting that tweet from the official Netflix Twitter account to show people that it was in fact them
that marijuana policy
that had broken in. Netflix removed the tweets quickly after the hack went public and says, quote, the compromise was limited to a U.S. Twitter account and has been resolved, unquote. As for Our Mine, they claim to want to upgrade security for its targets by pointing out security flaws without exploiting them. The group also hacked
and this is kind of an experiment. We'll see how it goes.
Into Marvel's official Twitter account, as well as verified accounts for some of Marvel's most famous Avengers,
including my goal is to get on the committees
Tony Stark and Captain America. The messages posted on the accounts were the same or similar to the message
we'll have a race for the House of Delegates this
posted to the official Netflix Twitter account.
When I went to
this isn't Our Mine's first time at the hacking rodeo, though. They have also taken credit for hacks on very high-profile tech targets, including Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and Google CEO Sundar Pichai. For more information, check out cnet.com. I'm Ashley Esqueda. Be good humans.
At town halls, and they usually sponsor town halls and legislative breakfast around. So that's my
Yeah, that's.
Are you saying you're not?
Actually, I'm glad that you mentioned
What
it.
I'm saying is that I will tell you at the
we're talking
time.
about
I'll keep you in
contacting our council
suspense.
members and encouraging them to include the decriminalization medical expansion as a recommendation, but it just doesn't.
Donald Trump would
doesn't
not
stop
promise
with
to
just
accept
one
the
email.
results of the presidential election, challenging the tradition of a peaceful transfer of power.
I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time.
That's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him.
After the debate, Trump's campaign manager and running mate said the GOP nominee will reserve judgment until all votes are cast.
He has the prerogative to wait and see how the election comes out.
Absent widespread fraud and irregularities, then, we'll see.
On the debate stage, Trump again denied numerous allegations of sexual assault.
Those stories are all totally false. I have to say that. I think they want
Excellent feedback. Again, specific to here in Virginia. But what I was getting at is it doesn't stop with just one email. We have to cultivate relationships with our elected officials. So after you send your email encouraging the support of the decrim and the medical expansion, it's a good idea to go and follow their Facebook page, follow their Twitter page, interact with them on social media. And I don't mean for you to go and antagonize them or make fun of them, call them out in any way, but you're trying to establish a relationship that will be fruitful for your efforts down the road. So as you're engaging your local lawmakers, don't expect instant gratification. It's a process. So once you send your letter in and encourage these things, follow their Facebook page, go to an event. A lot of city council members pancake breakfast. So essentially they just go in their district and they'll give away pancakes and invite people to come have coffee with them. That's a great opportunity for you to follow up and say, hey, Councilman Clark just sent you an email a few weeks ago asking if you're going to include medical expansion and decrim in the recommendations for the state legislature. Don't want to get into it now, just touching base, seeing where you're at and whatnot. But again, it's cultivating a relationship so that when your lawmaker sees you, he doesn't run because start yelling marijuana, right? Relationship and there's some type of a respect, so they can rely on you as job and pass marijuana. Yes. No, I completely agree. We want to be careful, and we want to be the educators. We want to be a resource for our lawmakers. That's how I end, I would say, every email to any elected official that I communicate. Not hesitate. I always want to be their number one person speed dial. If they have a question about marijuana, if they're getting misinformation from a prohibition group, call in and check with me. That's one of our jobs as activists. So again, establishing relationships, cultivating their beneficial. So anybody? Yeah, they're on NORML's website, and we can make them available. Yeah, and our website is endless information about marijuana, medical, adult use. And so, absolutely. But yeah, use that website. I use that website so much. I receive emails all day, and most of my answers. A lot of good resources. So I encourage you to use those. Anybody have anything else? If not, we're gonna break for lunch. Alrighty, guys. Thank you very much.
Let's give it up for Kevin coming out here from Colorado. Real quick, before we head off to lunch, I want to remind you that we've got the silent auction going on in the back of that area over there. A bunch of knickknacks and goodies and books and T-shirts and fun stuff that you can write your bid down on. Helps to benefit Virginia NORML, so we can keep having these wonderful events. We're going to go off to lunch till 2. Is that the idea? And Jen Michelle has a couple other things to add.
If you're lobbying with us tomorrow, and we need to be sure that we have you account. Is this off? What happened to me? I can't hear. I had a lot of chemotherapy. Sorry. I can't hear. Sign up for Lobby Day. So I know you all registered, but we need to be sure that you are accurately counted if you are participating in tomorrow's Lobby Day. So all you have to do is stop by and check in with Nikki at the desk. If you purchased a parking pass from us for Lobby Day, stop by and see Nikki at the desk. And if you see Creed here, go ahead and sign his petition. And if you don't have a gold leaf pin, see us and we'll give you one. All right, thanks everyone.